Hello, everyone. This is Samantha Garcia here, and I'm going to be presenting on vocabulary inquiry across languages. And this can be found on page 165 through 169 in our TLG book. So the book definition is here on the left, which is quite lengthy. So you can go ahead and read that. And my definition on the right is vocabulary inquiry consists of studying languages on a deeper level by making connections between all linguistic repertoires. So an example is English in another language. My LOT is Spanish, so that's what I'll be comparing it to for sake of example. This consists of inquiring into the language or languages and seeing where connections can be made to further increase understanding by analyzing vocabulary in said language or languages. So when looking into my implementation across grade levels, in the TLG book, this strategy as a whole was only noted for middle and high school, but I do believe that these strategies could work for pretty much, at least this specific one could work for elementary, middle, or high school. So the first strategy we're going to look at is vocabulary journals, which I'm sure we are all somewhat familiar with these. So for these specific vocabulary journals, students will read either in whole group or independently. It works either way, and they will note new words in their journal. These journals can be set up in any way that best fits your students' needs or how your classroom is run or the topics that you guys are working with. So some examples of how to set these journals up would be cognates between languages, word parts, and word sounds. These journals allow students to compare words between different languages, more than just one. It could be multiple languages. So with the vocabulary journals, you should allow opportunities for students to share their journals with their peers. And notice that you're grouping heterogeneously, which is something that I was a bit um, not taken back by, but I guess a little bit shocked because I'm used to grouping students homogeneously with their languages. But later in the presentation, I'll talk about why this is so beneficial and um, unique. So for an example, this would be pairing a Spanish-speaking student with a French-speaking student. So this is beneficial so that they compare and contrast characteristics of words between all present languages, which can be added to their journals. So students are able to compare the differences and similarities between not only this word in English and their home language, but also, for example, say I'm a student who is bilingual. My home language is Spanish, and I'm speaking with a student, like I said, that speaks French. I'm now able to have a third language to compare this word in. So I'm looking at it in Spanish, English, and French as well, which is something I probably wouldn't have been able to do without my peer, comparing it with my peer. And this is just a picture here. Like I said, the vocabulary journals can be set up in a way that fits your needs. So if you were doing, if I guess, for example, was doing cognates, I might have it listed with the word in English and then listing its cognates underneath. Or you could list the word in your home language. Like I said, I'm going to be using Spanish for sake of example, and then listing the cognates underneath that in the other languages. Now, the next one we're going to be looking at is semantics or concept maps. I believe that this tool could also be used for elementary, middle, or high school. So this is used as a brainstorm tool, and it allows students to explore the origins and relationships between words and languages. So this image that I have in the bottom here is taken directly from our book, and I chose it because I really liked the word that they chose and the different branches that they have. So this is really just showing how many different languages are being compared in this tool. So, like I said, it's being compared with French, Spanish, Arabic, Russian, and Haitian Creole. So an example of this is researching a word from a specific topic and seeing how all the words or how the words all compare when translated into multiple different languages. So in this example, I'm assuming it's a math lesson. They chose the word angle, and they were able to see that in French, it looks exactly the same. In Spanish, it's pretty similar, not exact. Arabic, of course, the alphabet is different. So that's something very noteworthy to see as well, because not only are we looking at the similarities, we're looking at the differences as well. And then this will lead to a discussion regarding why the word has certain relationships within different languages. What are the characteristics? What does it mean? And why is it this way? So, getting more into the origin and the relationship, as I said before, of the word and the language as a whole. Lastly, this example is specifically noted for high school. I'm sure that it could be modified for different grade level, but this example is taken from our book, and it was, I believe, for a ninth grade um, lesson. So in the example, they were reading the book of Mice and Men. So while I'm describing it, I will refer to it as they referred to it in the book. That being said, I do believe that this strategy would be useful for many different books. But for sake of example and explanation, I will be using of Mice and Men. So while students are reading a book, and discuss words that relate to the home language. So in the example, they'd be reading the book of Mice and Men. And in the example, the ESL teacher had communicated with the classroom teacher and was able to make sure that when they were doing standalone instruction, they were completing the same content that was being completed in the classroom. So another thing to note about Of Mice and Men specifically is that this book has the TLG book refers to it as Steinbeck English. So it's is like slang from the 1920s and stuff like that that even a native English speaker may not be or probably will not be familiar with, because it's just not modern English. It's not what we use in 2023 or in present time. So it's very important to draw attention to and clarify slang and idiomatic language. So what students will do is they will analyze the words and they will add a new word to the word wall and also to their vocabulary journals. So this is what we discussed in our previous slide with vocabulary journal. So when looking at the slang words, have students analyze in pairs and make connections by asking these questions. So these questions are pulled right from the book. I did modify it so that the one question was a little more generalized. But the questions are, what is the source of this slang word and where does it come from? So there'll need to be a little bit of research done here to figure out where the slang word originates from, and where it comes from. So next question is, what is the same word in modern English? So either a translation or a synonym, depending on the word. So as I said before, it depends on the book that they're reading, where the word is coming from, and for the example specifically, it would be translated or put into modern English, since this quote unquote Steinbeck English is 1920 slang. So what is the same word in your home language? So for example, if I was a student and my home language was Spanish, I would take this word and I would translate it to find out what the word is in my home language. And lastly, are the words and their meanings similar or different across these languages, and in what ways? So for sake of example, I'm a student, my home language is Spanish. I'm going to be comparing this word with Steinbeck English, aka 1920s English slang, my home language Spanish, and modern English. So present time language, what we're using now in 2023. So then lastly, students are going to create a PowerPoint presentation to demonstrate the connection between the word and its different forms, as I noted before, the 3 different forms or however many languages are at play for the student. So this is a really interesting tool, and I think that it's very beneficial for students to not only be comparing it from their home language to English, but I think that this other level and layer that's being added by reading specifically this book of Mice and Men is very interesting, because although Steinbeck is speaking in English in the book, some of the words and phrases, as somebody who has read Of Mice and Men, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have as well in high school or college, the English can be confusing. And there have been times, like, for example, myself as a native English speaker, if I'm reading Shakespeare, for example, I might have to look a couple words up, because although it's English, it's not present time English. This is not the type of English that we are speaking in day-to-day conversation typically. So I think it's very noteworthy to say that there are still some English words that need clarification. And lastly, here are some noteworthy tips that I came across while looking into this. So, vocabulary inquiry can be used to teach any language and not just English. So, I found this very interesting because this vocabulary inquiry is used to make connections between the home language and the target language. So, if somebody is learning Spanish or French, they can make these same connections between the home language if the home language was English and they're trying to learn another language like German or any other language, they're able to make these connections, find the cognates, find the word sound similarities, stuff like that. My next one is do not be scared to pair students who do not have the same home language, excuse me. This allows them to compare and contrast even more. So I believe I mentioned this before. This was something that kind of took me by surprise. I'd never really thought of compare or pairing students up who did not speak the same home language, simply because I wasn't sure how they would be able to help each other. And now, after researching this strategy, I'm able to see that it really does help more than you would think, because now there's a whole other added level of inquiry. Instead of looking at it with two languages, you're looking at three different languages. And then this sort of ties into my last bullet of encouraging students to talk to each other in their home language, even if it's not the same. Because although they will not fully understand each other, it's a great opportunity to compare what they can analyze. So, as I noted before, sounds, structure, cognates, etc. Um, Although they might not understand what is being spoken to them, if, for example, I, as a Spanish speaking student, was communicating with a German speaking student, I'm probably not going to be able to understand what they're saying, but I will be able to notice, okay, this word sounds like this word in my native language, or this word sounds like this word in English, or so on and so forth. I think it's very important to not only note what the students can notice in their home language and the target language, but I think it's also important to note that there are things to notice in other languages as well. So yeah, this is my presentation and here are my references. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing what you guys point out in the replies. Thank you very much.